In step 1, you practiced creating value by shading a value scale and applying those values to a circle to create a 3-dimensional sphere. Now we are moving on to our actual project. For this project, you are going to need an 8.5 by 11 black sheet of construction paper, a pencil, eraser. You may want to print off or reference the dessert idea pages in the Google slide. You are going to select a dessert of your choice to sketch on your black piece of paper. In this demonstration, I have chosen to sketch an ice cream cone. Depending on what your dessert is, you want to utilize the space of your paper as best as possible. So depending on what dessert you choose will determine which way your paper will go. I've chosen an ice cream cone, which tends to be more vertical, so therefore my paper is vertical. If you choose, for example, to do a slice of pie, it's more horizontal, and therefore you'll want to turn your paper accordingly. So the focal point of this artwork is the dessert. It's all about the dessert, and you're only drawing one dessert. So we want to utilize the space. We don't want a really small sketch of a dessert and then a bunch of dead, empty black paper left. So make sure you're sketching large and you're utilizing the space of your paper. So I'm referencing the idea sheet to help guide me as I sketch my ice cream cone lightly. And then for this project, you have the choice of using either oil pastels or chalk pastels. In this demonstration, I have selected chalk pastels. So when you begin to add color, remember we are working from dark to light, so you first must determine where your light source is. So I've determined that my light source is going to be on the right side of my paper, so therefore I'm going to start with my darker values or my darker colors first. So I'm using purple as my dark color. I'm going to mix that with a little bit of blue here in a moment, and then I'm going to transition my cone to the highlighted side, which I'm going to be using yellows and greens. So we are using bold, bright colors. That's a characteristic of the pop art movement. So the colors that you select for your dessert do not, and I would actually prefer they not be realistic. So if you choose to draw an ice cream cone like I have, you are not coloring the ice cream cone brown. I really want to see bold, bright, fun colors. You may pick whatever color you want, but choose something bright. And I want you to experiment using color as your transition of value versus mixing black and white. So you don't see that I'm not using black and mixing it with my purple to make it darker. I'm using blue. And I'm not using white for my highlights. I'm using yellow and green. So really consider using color to create that transition of value versus always just using white and black. Now, I don't mind if you use a little bit here and there. You'll see that I do actually use a little bit of white in the actual ice cream portion. So my ice cream, I've chosen to do red. So I'm using red as my dark color on my shadowed side. And then I'm going to use pink as my highlighted side. And then I'm going to blend those together, but I'm also going to go back through and add a little bit of white just because I wanted a little bit more of a highlight. So play around with color, have fun experimenting, make sure you blend with your finger. You'll see here that I blend my red and my pink together to get that gradual transition from dark to light. Be careful when blending. The chalk is very messy. Oil pastel is as well, but I feel like the chalk is super messy. And notice that I had to go wash my hands. After blending my cone, my purples and my blues, I had purple and blue and green all over my fingers. And then I didn't want to mix those colors in with my reds and pinks. So be sure you're washing your hands before blending. All right, so I've blended some of my red in with my pink, and now I'm going to go back in and sort of add some highlights with white just to really get some of those highlights. I'm going to also add in more pinks because you can see here in my current process of the drawing there's some black spots, so we really want to not have any black showing through your dessert. So make sure you're blending. You can overlap and layer really well using chalks and oils. So have fun experimenting with the blending process there. Once you're happy with your value, your shadow and your highlights with color on your dessert, be sure you are adding a table or some sort of ground line. We don't want our dessert just floating in space. Also, you'll notice in the Wayne Thiebaud examples, he always has a cast shadow, and that also helps our artworks to look more three-dimensional. So don't forget your cast shadow, and then also remember when you're adding color to your ground or your plate or whatever your dessert is sitting on, that you have one side that is going to be your highlights where your light source is hitting. So you can see I used yellow on the lighter side of my cone where my light source is hitting, and then I transitioned it into red on the darker shadowed side, and then I've used purple as my cast shadow. You do not have to add color into the remaining background. You can leave that black, but if you would like to add color to it, that is totally fine. You're just going to continue to emphasize where your highlight is and where the darker side of your dessert background is going to be. So the upper portion of the background is optional. Once you're happy with it, take a picture and submit it to the Google Classroom Assignment 3. And I hope you enjoyed practicing with different materials with oil pastels or chalk pastels and creating the illusion of three-dimensional by incorporating value into your drawing.